Okay, I often get inquiries about the price of land on Bohol. Well, of course, there is no price of land on Bohol. It varies wherever you go, and I suspect that within a mile, one property could be worth twice what another property could be, and all within the space of a mile. And that's the same the world over. But I've just been into Taliban now, and I'm looking at it with the idea that I'm trying to get an idea of what land should be. And so I'm no real estate agent, and I'm no great one at pricing things. But what I do recognize, which is relevant and pertinent, say, when I look around in Bohol, is that in spite of all the doom that we hear about how the economy is going to crash, and certainly the powers that be seem to be working with that in mind, on very little evidence, well, on no evidence of interpersonal contamination, shall we say. They've locked the world down, and small businesses are going bust because they can't stand the heat. So things are changing. But here in Bohol, and I'm speaking for my particular area, which is between Taliban and Atafi, things seem to me on the surface to be booming. Now, I'm a great believer in the fact that us minions down the bottom of the feed chain know very little about what's coming, and all of the big plans have all been made by those in the know, and that's why you have laws governing insider trading, so that by taking advantage of information that you have that nobody else has, you can make a killing, you can make a profit. If you know that the price of land is going to rise sharply, then you must know why, other than perhaps you are psychic. But if you think about it, when you look around, there are people who know a lot more than you do at any given time. And I look around in Bohol, and I look around in Taliban, and my conclusion, for what it's worth, and it's just my opinion, but there's a lot of big business that knows something more than I do, and they're investing a great deal of money. Now, with the Yamaha bike that I just bought, if you have actually been to a place like Taliban, there are thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands of bikes, motorcycles in use, and there are quite possibly 40 or 50 or maybe even more places that sell bikes. So I had to take a little break there for a moment. I'm exchanging our water bottles at the Yana Spring Water Centre. So we bring our bottles in and they exchange it. Nothing exciting there. But what I was saying about what I see in Bohol, in Taliban, is that there are some big plans for this area, and it's going on, and we've been watching it for several years. To recount what I've seen, they're widening the roads, strengthening, and often just scrapping a bridge and rebuilding it to take a greater weight. So bridges are being built and rebuilt, stronger, bigger, better. I'm seeing much grander municipal halls being built and expanded. There's one that we see on our way to Tagbilaran, which is palatial, and it's next to a very, very small nothing town. Now, there are other places in Taliban where there are improvements being made, which, unless you think about something happening in the future, they actually don't make sense. They've had a kind of a Dumaketi type, mini type promenade built, which has been done really beautifully, but it's only about 200 yards long, if that, maybe probably only 100 yards long. And then off to the other side, San Fernando, they've that's a small district of Taliban, and they put up a kind of a seawall. And this is only hearsay now, but a friend of mine who told me that a friend of his, right, had gone out there with another expat, had gone out there with the intention of nosing around and having a look, satisfying his curiosity. And he was stopped, little bit like the super security things in America, where some guy that's twice as big as you and fully armed advises you very politely, "Sir, you should turn back now, okay? I mean, now." And he was stopped. He was stopped like that from just taking a look. So something is happening, and it's obvious. There was a poster here. They'll put a big poster up if something is being planned, and they do that so that people know and are aware that things are being upgraded and better times are ahead. You know, I've got to pay the man for the water. They're putting it on the back of the truck. So that's what I see. I see lots of businesses. There are a couple of businesses that went under when the typhoon last Christmas, when that struck. There were, like, there's a little wash place there where they'll do your laundry, and the roof caved in. It's still caved in. They just locked the doors and went home, I guess, and that was never replaced. That's a rare thing, and I've lived through areas that are folding, that are collapsing before. Well, I was in the UK when things got very, very tough there, and I walk along the high street, you would pass shop after shop after shop that was closing up, that was boarded up. I've seen it happening, and apparently I've also seen videos where London apparently is like that, and the videos that I saw of London compared to the London that I worked in for many, many years were shocking. Streets comparatively empty, not so much traffic. There must be lots of reasons for that, but stores closing in the centre of London. So I've seen it. Is that it, sir?
60.
What do I owe you? How much, Nakano?
60.
60. Hold on. There you are, sir. Thank you. So having said that about London, I haven't seen that in Bohol. I haven't seen it, well, I have seen it in Bohol. On the lockdowns, we went to Panglao, and Panglao, it was like being around a dead carcass in the road. it was dying. It's made a comeback, but it was very sad at the time. We looked at the way that businesses had been forced to close, tourism, which has now finally started opening up. We watched how that had been killed. It's recovering now, and we know this very well because at that time, when not so much at the lockdowns, but when tourism was completely blocked, we went to some of the very, very big, swank and extremely expensive resorts which had to cut their price drastically. Well, it would have to be drastic so that we could go there. And we actually celebrated my birthday at one of those resorts, and the price was cut down to the bone so that they could just about pay their expenses, and that's how it was then. It's not like that anymore. Back are the big resorts, and they are it's not easy even at the high prices. Just focusing on my driving a little, and it's not easy even with the big resorts now to just go there and get a room or rooms. So things are recovering, and it's especially in our area, which we are between Talabon and Etafe. That's where we live, Burgos, and I think we're about 6 or 7 kilometers from Etafe, and we're about according to the signs that I have seen, or signposts, we are about 19 or 20 kilometers, turning onto our dirt road. Yeah, we're about 19 or 20 kilometers from Talabon. So we're in a good position to get a feel for the way that things are. Now, what's the big change that could possibly be happening to real estate in our area? Well, there is a bridge which is supposedly coming in very, very soon. I spoke a couple of years ago when we were going out to, I spoke to the lady when I was paying for my parking fee after we'd been to Bohol, so that's about 3 or 4 years ago, and I said, so when's the bridge coming through? And she said 20 years. I have a feeling that that has risen exponentially, and we're actually looking now that it could be relatively soon compared to 20 years. So someone's letting me go through. So the bridge will land in Etafe. Now Etafe is literally a one-horse town. Well, if you get my meaning. It has a very big church, Roman Catholic church, that they've just spent about 5 million pesos on restoring, and it doesn't have a great deal more than that. It doesn't, I don't think it even has an international bank. So there's just a little landline bank that is there, and if you don't live in the area, they don't deal with you. It's just there to service the locals. So there's a lot of things got to happen there. But in Talabon, that's not the case. In Talabon, you've got companies which I assume, I've always assumed that in the case of, say, McDonald's, but if you own a corner of a street and you approach McDonald's and say, I'd like to buy a franchise, they don't say, oh fine, yes, sign here, give us your money. No, they don't do that, because McDonald's is not about to have its image tarnished, and the value of its franchise sales go down by letting just anybody have a McDonald's. So they come along, and from my information, they come along and they do a feasibility study. Say, okay, you have, yes, we can see you have a corner there. Let's have a look at what the traffic is, and they'll do a thorough search as to how successful they can expect that to be. Now, so far, McDonald's have not been able to get a foot in Taliban, and it's a very small town centre. So until the town centre begins to expand, as it will, McDonald's doesn't have a foot in there. But there are other buildings which show the signs of a big company. As I said, Yamaha, Suzuki, all coming in with big facilities, showing that they're going to put on sale and have Western style showrooms where everything is beautifully tiled, everybody has a uniform, they have a beautiful workshop. I just had my bike serviced today. It's a small, it's not a huge workshop, but it's beautifully tiled, it's beautifully clean, it's well equipped and worthy of the name Yamaha, which is a world-class bike. Suzuki's the same. So, and they have been built on the outskirts of Taliban, and this obviously is in a kind of a prophecy of how the town will expand beyond its local borders now. So all of that is showing that stuff is going to happen, and it's already happening, and my guess is that they try to keep a cap on it, on the information out, so there's not this mad scramble that doesn't get anybody anywhere, or certainly doesn't get the big guys to make the money that they want to. So that's what's happening at the moment. Now, people, an inquiry today from a subscriber said, how much is land on Bohol? As if it were possible to give an answer to such a question. I respond, say, well, depends on location. And that's exactly what happens in any part of the world. So if you come here and you take a piece of land that is accessed by a dirt road that is as awful as ours, and you are high in the mountains on a very isolated site, then you're not going to pay the same price as someone who has managed to find themselves as an actual seafront, an oceanfront piece of property that could feasibly be held as an investment and later could be sold to someone who has the money to build an actual oceanfront resort. So there's no such thing as what the every square meter of the island is worth. There's no such thing. And one thing is certain, prices are going up. And I can say that because I'm not interested in buying and selling land, but people that we have talked to who have asked, one lady that I was actually going to work with at one time, making furniture, until I realized that I would have to make furniture for a fraction of what I used to make it in California, and in not so much in Florida. California, I used to make custom furniture, which I used to design and build, and I was paid very well. It wasn't regular enough to make me a rich man, but I did okay. And when I thought about going into that here, I went and had a chat with a very nice lady that owns a furniture store, and I showed her my portfolio, and she was very interested. I know that I've digressed, but it is part of the story. And she was very interested and said, yes, I would like, could you make me some doors, and I'll put them in the showroom and we'll take orders. So that was when I thought that it might be okay. It turned out that I wasn't prepared to do that. Start sniffing the sawdust again was not in my immediate plans or otherwise plans. So later we got in touch with that lady again, and it turned out that she was selling pieces of property. We were looking for ourselves at that time, but in talking to us, she had bought property at a very, very low price and was now selling it for millions of pesos. It doesn't matter if a pesos, if a dollar is worth 56 pesos. That doesn't matter. We live in pesos, so a million anything is a million, right? So she had done this and made an enormous amount of money on one particular site. The ideal situation for someone who wants to make a lot of money, they buy a piece of property that's next to a big company who didn't know about that sale, bought the property for not the going price, but in view 2 years later, when that big company wanted to expand, that piece of property next door becomes extremely valuable to them. So that's a lot of what's happening in Taliban, and why, if you're interested in buying property, we tell people that now is the time to come in. We're at the end of certainly what was a pandemic, for whatever your beliefs are on that, and it certainly had the whole area locked down, that's for sure, for a while, because tourism was practically killed off. What would have sold quite easily perhaps to an incoming expat was no longer selling, because there were no incoming expats for a while. That's changing now, and people are telling me that they're coming, and they're coming in next year. Some coming by Christmas, some have had to postpone it a little because they're still not quite happy with the so-called requirements for travel into the country. Those requirements have been released, have been dropped very recently. As far as we have heard, you're not required to have the vaccination, but if you don't, I think a quarantine is still there. Either that, or within 24 hours of traveling, you had I think it's a swab test, PCR test, which you're willing to take that, and it's negative, then you can come in. Still, my spin on that is you should be very careful, because who knows what will happen, how it will happen, if you have the wrong immigration officer to deal with. So even that requires a little judgment. But those who have had the jab have no problem. I think they still have to have the 24-hour negative test result. But other than that, I think that they can come in fairly easily. And we did have one man who said he came in, the whole thing, he's had the jabs, and has a card, and has the test, the negative test, and he said the whole thing was painless and over in half an hour. So depending on what you've done, that's that. But that's a little indicator of what's happening and why with the land prices. I think I hope it makes things a little more clear for you. I'll see you later. I'm almost home.